What's going on, guys? It's Frito here. I've been grinding Season 1 and getting up to top 1% both in Season 0 and Season 1 has really taught me a lot of the game. Now, of course, that's not such a high rank when it comes to the grand scheme of content creators. Most of them are in the top 0.1% or even higher than that. However, when I make a tier list, I'm able to focus on the types of things that the average player does deal with in a more complete sense of the game, whereas a lot of top players, when they give advice or make tier lists, they kind of discount a big percentage of the game because their skill outweighs it so much. And this is a game where if your mechanics can outplay certain things, a lot of characters aren't going to apply to you, but for average players, a lot of those strategies are still very much in play. However, Season 1, uniform across the board at all ranks, there's two characters that define everything. First of all, we'll talk about Storm. Giga buffed all the way up to S tier, has a high win rate as well. Mainly if your team is even with the enemy, like if you don't have any major weaknesses on your team, I would say Storm auto wins because she holds a position that's hard to get to and just adds extra damage and has a carry ultimate. Between those two things, Storm just is the best character at her type of position, so try to pick her when you can. When you start to win and the enemy's stalling onto the cart, for example, she's flying in the sky doing insane damage, and unless you are able to really construct the engagement in a way that you directly counter her and punish her, she's still not the best at dueling because she doesn't have escape abilities necessarily, but in a full poke team fight when things are established, in a lot of scenarios, she's just way too strong. So you have to kind of construct how you engage entirely if you're aiming to counter her rather than mirror her, so keep that in mind. Now, even more important to me is Wolverine, who is a character that they rearranged his health a bit. His shout has 10% less durability, but the fact is he normally wasn't going to die with that ability on anyway, so that kind of didn't matter. And instead he got 50 extra normal health, which means as you're trying to poke him with certain characters, especially like tanks who have moderate damage values, he hard counters a lot of characters in the game, including Mr. Fantastic, who's way down here in situational flex pick C tier. A lot of tier lists are going to put him down to F tier, but I'm going to put him here down in C. Characters that have higher health pools, because Wolverine does percentage-based damage, he automatically rolls, and so a character like this, even if he has some potential, is just going to get rolled by Wolverine. The problem with Wolverine is like he can walk at your front line from the front, he can flank your front line and CC them all the way into your team. So there's a lot of ways where he just hardcore counters the game, and I don't think that he's very difficult to play, honestly. Now, in order to counter Wolverine, and I do have more in-depth guide videos I'm going to be making as well, but those take a lot of editing time, and we want to be able to get this information out to you as fast as possible. But certain things that you want to think about when dealing with a Wolverine, which you want to avoid playing, is certain heroes that I'm going to drop down into A tier that might seem a little bit surprising, like characters that otherwise dominate the game are very difficult to pick up against certain things. When the counter picks are this harsh, then it's going to be harder than it was before to pick Strange all of the time. He is an S tier tank hero, great in a lot of scenarios, but still, if you're solo tank Strange, like you used to be in Season 0, and they go Wolverine, and you both have triple DPS, if your DPS isn't a Wolverine, and you don't easily destroy the enemy tank, you just get destroyed. So it's very easy for this one hero to mark out a lot of the other tanks. So he's going to go to A tier. Surprisingly, I have gotten the hang of Penny, but Penny does counter Wolverine and Thor. These are two characters that are actually pretty good against him, where they actually can fight him a little bit. I'm going to put Thor a little bit higher than Penny. Penny's a situational pick, but pretty underrated considering how many melee characters are coming at you. That's kind of the secret with Penny. She's outplayed by poke. The archetypes, or archetypes, someone in the comments try to correct me on this, the archetypes of the different characters in Marvel Rivals are very severe. Like if you're a poke comp, you can give it infinite ammo with Rocket. If you're a brawl comp, you can go in really fast and do lots of damage. Like the close range, long range dichotomy is really severe, and so you really have to build your comp to be able to handle those different permutations and focus on the key top heroes. There's a lot of heroes that have decent value, but a few that are like S tier, and those are the ones that dominate the game. The higher ranked players put tanks up in S tier, but I'm actually not going to put any tanks in S tier because I think tanks as a concept are often you need to play solo tank, first of all. And second of all, even if you go 2 tanks, there's lots of ways for them to just have way too much damage, even if you're on 3 support, because most players don't play the formations that top players do. When you start watching some of the Eternity streams, everyone's positioned in a way that's covering each other's backs, whereas even as high as my rank in the top 1%, some games, everybody's all over the place, right? Just taking bad duels left, right, and center. So you need to be able to perform something that's going to help win the game now, as opposed to think you're just going to play 3 support and camp together. That often just doesn't work, because if they have an S tier pick that's getting an outmoded value, you can't really just overcompensate with that with any formation of team comp. You have to go at their S tier pick or mirror it yourself, because I do think triple DPS is so strong right now. Hulk is a pretty good solo tank for that. Hulk and Strange, these are all good tanks, but I just don't think you often want 2 tanks, because if they have Wolverine, you don't counter them, well, you're just kind of screwed. With the team up with Hulk, I do think Iron Man is S tier. He counters a lot of the game just with his range control and flanking. He actually isn't as good as Storm, but with the team up, he almost is. That's just how good Storm is as a character in general. Start to populate with some of the supports now. I think Mantis for me is an S tier. The stats kind of show this. Mantis has a really high win rate and just has so much overall stats. Once you start damage amping everybody on your team or applying pressure yourself and you have a sleep, she's pretty insane. Often I don't feel like the support ult gameplay is what's dictating a lot of fights, because that starts to get more important the higher rank you get. Again, when you have good, clean team formations, support ults get more value. We saw this in Overwatch as well. If you think about like the GOATS meta, right? Like you're probably not positioning well enough in order to use triple support. It feels very forgiving with the amount of healing you have, but if you don't form the engagement and push pull appropriately, the support ults lose value, because there is certain things that can kill through the support ults anyway. So as soon as you expect to win with a Q button, misuse it, use it too early. Again, guys, support players, do not engage with your defensive ults, right? Defensive ults are to be used in response to counter enemy ults. I see this all the time, especially with cloak and dagger players, where you're down 1 or 2 members and they think just because they can survive, they're going to support ult in to touch the point. The enemy just backs up a little bit, pulls away, and nothing happens, right? I think cloak and dagger are forgiving and playable, but gets picked way more than I think deserves to, essentially. Very popular character, but is sort of just a heal bot. Same thing with Rocket is the same thing. I'd say Rocket can dodge a lot of dives. So if you're in a rank where Hulk doesn't get banned and they're hard diving you, Rocket's pretty good because he's durable. He gets a revive, but his ultimate is a little tricky to use. You have to be even smarter and you go the other way, where you want to initiate with Rocket ult in order to gain an early advantage and mow them down, keep map control. But Rocket ult is a little bit harder to use because it can be destroyed and you really need your team to use it. Whereas with a defensive support ult like Invisible Woman, for example, who I am going to put in S tier above Mantis, in fact, she can dictate the entire battle, okay? Like splitting off and disappearing the enemy, it means like they can't use a lot of their best stuff because they might not see him to be able to even aim it to begin with. And you're healing your team, which out heals a lot of things. It isn't as strong as Luna ult, but the rest of Invisible Woman's kit is pretty insane. And we start to think like these are the S tier characters. Pro tip for you with Invisible Woman is give the shield to a teammate on an off angle. So this acts like a little riot shield for them to use, and it heals them. So especially these flying characters, they're on an off angle, you shield them in the air, they can win duels more easily or just be really oppressive on that. Otherwise, the shield can be kind of used to heal your front line. There's certain characters that are pretty good on the front line. I will put Groot. Ooh, I almost want to put Groot in S tier. I feel like most Groot players don't deserve the S tier placing, but once you really learn how to use him, I see so many people still using his walls wrong. What you want to do is put the healing wall off to the side, away from the battle, play within its range, and then as you farm attacks, you gain health, then use your attack walls to manipulate the battlefield, and with his ultimate, you actually can overpower the multi-support ults. The problem is, again, Groot kind of needs the team to be working around you. Otherwise, you start to look a little silly. And then the Wolverine's just going to come roll you. And so I can't really put Groot in S tier. I think the higher rank you get, Groot looks incredible, but I'm going to have to put him down somewhere in the middle here. I like Captain America a lot, but even still, he's the type of pick that will help you not lose the game, but is very difficult to just straight up win the game. If you're mechanically so skilled on him that you never miss any ability and you can just run it down at the enemy, the best Captain Americas in the world look like this, where they never miss and they're just running in, boom, 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 and have amazing awareness, push pull. Captain America can take over the game, but it's just not as easy to directly get kills on yourself, and you don't really counter anything necessarily. You start to wonder like which tanks count as a main tank in Marvel Rivals, which are an off tank. Well, it's like Captain and Thor are kind of like two off tanks, really. And that's the ones you want to run because they can just run it down and they create with their tank synergy. There's not that many really strong tank synergies in the game, but the way they work together and fight the same fight, that's the most similar tank synergy that there is to Overwatch, frankly. And especially since he gets a team up, that's when he looks scariest when you're using these two. And considering those melee heroes run over Strange and Magneto, I really just don't think any of the tanks are in S tier anymore. Because on top of that, you'll be setting up a character like Wolverine, and even if one of your tanks goes down, if Wolverine's alive, they're just going to wipe the enemy tanks. Venom, a lot stronger, situational on big wide open maps. He is fine. He's just fine. Not a lot of skill expression. They buffed him so he's more tanky, but you really don't want to get caught in the open tanking for too long. You really need the map to be the right one in order for Venom to look good. Once you start to get into the really big engagement distances, then Venom's pretty good. I am going to put Luna still up in S tier right behind Mantis because Mantis has overall more stat potential when she's set up. The benefit to Luna is like your ult can counter certain things. It depends if they have the capability to burst through your ult or not. Remember, ult second, ult later, be greedier with it. Try to swing the fight as opposed to establish the fight, because if you force in with the Luna ult, they have the opportunity to then decide, do we even fight this? Do we back up? Do we wait it out? Or are we able to swarm around and use our ults to overwhelm it? You would rather them try to be forced to start to use their ult and then swing a fight with it. Also, Luna is a little bit more maneuverable than Mantis, who's a little bit more stiff, doesn't really have movement, whereas Luna can start skating to go away and then super jump. She also has a defensive tool with the freeze. It's not quite as easy to hit as Mantis is, but Luna's very, very flexible, a very solid, reliable support character. Let's get some A tier DPS in here. I'm going to say Psylocke, Punisher, and Hela all in A tier. Kind of can mix these up depending on your rank, skill set, etc. Psylocke can fight all of the S tier DPS, which is pretty good. It's just you're going to need some skill in order to get value with the ultimate now that it can be blocked by tanking shields, and there's so many good support ults that make it tricky as well. It's a skill execution thing, kind of similar to Hela, who got a bit of a nerf, but if you look kind of across the board, she's still going to have good matchups against these characters that you're going to be seeing a lot, and as long as your accuracy and patience is pretty high, you're going to really start to rack up a lot of damage and be able to carry out of a lot of games, especially when you start to think of how many tanks does the enemy have. If they have a shield, then you'll slow down. If they don't have a shield and you just have free headshot lanes across the whole map, and she has an escape and a stun and a great ult, that's pretty insane. Punisher's pretty easy to play and can counteract certain things, like with a shotgun and a little bit of support, he can beat a tank, beat a Wolverine, and with multi-support and a lot of support ults, Punisher can be supported a lot if you play around your team. Starts to look weak when he's isolated, but just really holds a lot of value from that DPS position, whereas a lot of other characters are a bit gimmicky, need to set up, need to flank, need to do this. Punisher just stands with your team and can shoot everything. Also, they buffed the Rocket team up, giving him infinite ammo. I actually never see Hawkeye anymore, so I'm not really sure what to think about him. I still have faith that he's a decent pick, but I think after the nerfs, people just dropped playing him, it seems, in my games anyway. Instead, I see Namor more often, who I think also somewhere in here in the A tier. His ultimate is sick. The higher tier you go and the better the support ultimate usage is, maybe you weigh that ultimate to be much more important and you put it higher up. But for the average player, I'm going to say like he more just holds his position, and if you're not comboing well, you're not going to maximize what he can do, and he's good. Solid DPS hero. The one tank that I left out so far is Magneto, who I think is quite solid. He'll just go somewhere here. I think the tanks are just fine. All of the tanks kind of okay. Don't want to get run at by Wolverine, doesn't really contest Storm very well, but especially if you're up against a Punisher, then having his shield, I think some people don't realize this, Mag's shield is like Defense Matrix. It is infinite. So you can keep cycling on the front line, and poke DPS hate playing against Mag. Strange slows them down as well, and Strange is more maneuverable and a higher tier pick overall, but Mag ult can beat Punisher ult and go through a lot of the support ults as well. So Mag is kind of similar to Groot in terms of his carry potential in that position, and then adds a lot of defense to the front line. So on certain maps, if the enemy's playing poke, you can dictate a big swing in the poke exchange as you shoot back and absorb a lot of their ammo. Moon Knight got buffed, but I think is kind of gimmicky, but I do think he's stronger than most of the tanks. Pretty easy to play. His ultimate is absolute BS, and another reason why the tanks in general are weaker, because there's ultimates like this that exist. You can't just pick a tank and expect to hold your position indefinitely when there's ults like Moon Knight's ult that utterly destroys you, and there's nothing that can save you. If he presses it on you, you just die. It's kind of insane. This is a giga boosted character, but his playstyle is still kind of meh. But in the chaos, he can get his corny kills by setting up his Ankh angles. I think he's better than Hawkeye, actually, and probably Namor too. He's pretty easy to play. Who isn't easy to play are some of these melee characters we're going to populate in. I do believe in Iron Fist. He's a very controversial character where I think most players have a bad representation of what he does, but he's a lot harder to play against good players than you think. Like if you watch Magneto play, he dominates on this character, and mainly it's due to his management of the block when he uses it, maximizing it. Just the engagement control is insane. If I try to pick him, I feed my brains out in 10 seconds. So it's like, I think I can't play him. I don't even want to learn how to play him. Forget it. I'm good at a bunch of other characters, but I've seen crazy things, and I've seen casuals get rolled by him as well. The way his mechanics work is like you pop the block, they shoot it, you gain shields, and as you hit melees, you get another block. And ultimately that makes Iron Fist a lot more playable than a guy like Black Panther, who is another melee character, does more damage at low health, way more buttons to press. Like Black Panther goes in and out, throws a spear, has a lot of movement and attack combos, but the problem is because he's so much more punishable and you don't necessarily have an invulnerability option like Iron Fist does, I think it's just a risk to play him. Like you can get good value out of him. I'll put him above these two. Also, he's the top of B tier. Like it's not like you can't get him to work. It's just not really worth it when you are punishable. There's other options that are a bit better. Magic, I'm hit or miss on. Like when certain magics I play against, I feel like I can see where they're going. I can punish it. I can hit the stuns. I can hit whatever I need. Whereas the whiff punishes that you can do with magic are kind of insane. You bait them in, you start to take an angle, and then you combo them really quick. Magic's pretty nuts. I just think like Psylocke's way easier to play in theory, I think. It's more forgiving because you have a range poke and easier ult. If you master magic, you can get all the way up to A tier, perhaps. I just think like she's very specialist in how her movement works. Not as easy as Iron Fist. If you're an average player, like Iron Fist has Commando Pro from Modern Warfare 2, okay? He's just insta attacking, and if you learn the block, then you're gonna get a lot of free value, whereas magic requires a bunch of mastery because she has a ranged attack, combo, melee, and has to move through the fight perfectly. Once you do that, then she's insane, but she's just a little hard, I think, whereas these other characters are a little bit more just plug and play, don't really need mastery, just hit your shots. But expect Magic to be a character that kind of evolves over time and gets better as more players really start to learn her, because the potential is kind of insane. Speaking of insane potential, the Widowmaker character, I think, is even better than Black Panther, just ever so slightly. Just ever so like if you can aim, there's actually a lot of matchups that are pretty good because Storm gives damage amp, Mantis gives damage amp, so there's some matchups where she can be okay. But her ult still sucks, so that's a bit of a problem. It kind of doesn't do anything. The game moves pretty fast, and we have to ask, like, how good do we really want the sniper character to be anyway? Spider-Man, I'm gonna say everything about the mastery and execution, same thing as Magic. He's pretty underrated, I feel. Like, one of the biggest pub stomper characters in the game. As you get to the higher ranks, they're gonna put Spidey, like, down here, basically, because they know how to outplay him, they position well, the supports are ready. If the enemy has any errors in their formation, Spidey can swing across the map and punish it immediately and combo and get out and just steal your lunch money and you have nothing to do about it. I've seen Spidey's hard dominate some games, and there are some answers to it. I'm gonna say this character is super underrated, okay? I'm gonna say Scarlet Witch, definitely the top of B tier. Other tier lists are gonna put her down here, all the way in F, but I'm gonna say more reliable than some of these, like, because anybody can learn Scarlet Witch and mark a Spider-Man up in the sky or even a Magic. Scarlet Witch with a team up with Magneto, that's what you want to run, because you're going to make your front line stronger with a massive melee attack, giving him a power that he kind of doesn't have. Normally his frontlining is kind of bad, actually. Like, he's good against poke, but once he has this, now he has like a second tank ability and presence on the front line. Scarlet Witch can really do damage against the melee characters, and if you're wondering how to deal with Iron Fist, Magic, Spider-Man's kind of a melee character who flies, but if you want to know how to beat that, you can just play Scarlet Witch and hover above them almost the entire game, and it's really hard for them to contest you, because especially a character like Spidey, he wants to sling you and then melee to you, But if you can cleanse that off yourself, get above him and just zap him and never miss, part of the problem with Spidey is that he's just hard to hit. So if your aim isn't insane, the little target just zipping across your screen and web slinging is difficult to hit, whereas Scarlet Witch has Moira aim, so it's not hard to mark him down. But the same thing for a lot of these melee characters. She just kind of falls over when it comes to the top picks of the game, but isn't a bad third DPS. And since we're in a very 3 DPS, 3 support style meta, her being reliable, I think it's a mistake to put her down in F tier when most players are going to get way more value learning this character rather than trying to learn harder characters. And she's a good teammate with a stun, etc., etc. Adam Warlock is pretty difficult to play. I think is overrated. I see a lot of high tier players really rate him, but I think your aim's got to be kind of sick in order to actualize him. He has 2 cooldowns for healing. The heal link kind of is like an ultimate. It's pretty insane. You get nuts value, super long cooldown, but it's one and done. You cast it and the fight is going to be over by the time you get another one again. And then his heal is on a long cooldown. It does heal him and he can res himself. So what you want to do with Adam is play a bit forward, take duels, and use your aim to win. And if you're not doing that, which is kind of strange because a journalist compared Adam to Mercy, if anything, he's closer to Kiriko or Zen in terms of, you know, charging up ult fires, taking duels, really being aggressive with your damage. There is a team up between Adam Warlock and Mantis, but then all of your healing is on a resource as opposed to more forgiving healers that can spam out healing constantly. So that makes it a little difficult. Adam's res can be useful, but it's definitely the hardest support ult to use right. There's a lot of ways to accidentally get your team just wiped again if you res badly. With skill expression, you definitely put him up, and then as like a third support, maybe put him up too, but as a second support, I think he's a little difficult to play. I see the potential there, but you just need a lot of skill in order to get that out. If you had good aim and you wanted to carry the game, do you want to pick Adam or do you want to pick a hero that just kills them easier as DPS? If you're flexing off DPS to fill for the team comp, but you feel like you're an aim dependent player, then Adam's probably okay for you. But moving on, we got Loki. The higher up you go and the better the team formations are. Loki with his, I think his healing's AoE, right? Like the big burst of healing. I kind of can't remember, but definitely the totems, the better positioned your teammates are, you can help them and save them from ultimates. Then on top of that, your ult is insane. His ult might be the best, like way up here, because you're able to change, especially in a very unbalanced meta, right? The game right now is pretty unbalanced. You got Storm ult, you got Luna ult. These ults are insane, team fight winning. So Loki has the ability to decide, can we win with either one? So you basically have the option of whatever ults are on the field to copy and then execute. The problem is, he's kind of hard to play, requires some game sense. It gets tricky when you rank heroes across roles, but I do think it matters in open queue format because I want to emphasize, like, don't pick too many tanks. The easiest way to lose in the hero select formation, if you pick and play tanks badly, because they're so easy to punish. There's so many high anti-tank kit in the game right now. That's why they're all in A tier. I'm gonna put Loki somewhere in between here, okay? I think the better game sense player you are, the higher you can go. But honestly, I highly value the type of supports that are either able to duel on their own, which I think Luna can. She can hit headshots. Mantis can duel on her own, defend herself. These two are still top for me because no matter what your team's doing, you can change and adjust where the resources that you have go in order to just win a fight with a DPS and then contribute to the tank battle as well. I feel Loki doesn't necessarily have that same option. He sort of needs the team formation to be established properly, more similar to Invisible Woman, where you want your team in front of you to get value off of them. Whereas I think Invis Woman's ult gets value on accident. Loki, you have to be very good. The better you are, you can put him up to S tier, I think, probably. Sports are doing very well right now. Squirrel Girl, we missed an opportunity to put her near these other picks. Slightly better than Hawkeye, I think. Less reliable than Namor. Map situational, but in the map she's good. She's dominant, basically because they gave her an ultimate. Before, her ultimate was basically a joke. Now it's a heat-seeking missile. That's pretty insane. Jeff, sorry buddy, you're cute and adorable, but you're gonna land somewhere here in B tier, below Cloak and Dagger for sure, way down here. Jeff's not very good. He's a skill expressive hero because if you hit some shots, he can look like he's doing something. His ultimate can carry entire team fights, but it's so execution dependent, whereas other ults, you just sort of press and they win the fight. Jeff, He needs to hit shots and he needs to hit his ult, which requires some complicated timing, and they nerfed it so it's not as forgiving. I think most people get excited about sucking the entire team underground and then spinning them off for a team wipe. That's so unreliable to do. I think what maybe would make Jeff more of a top tier pick is if he more reliably could like save your teammates from death, because there's lots of easy ways to get team fight wins offensively. It looks flashier when the support hero also can add to do that, but you don't really need that because there's so many DPS that already can easily kill the enemy with their ultimate. 3 heroes left for the first half of season 1. I've got Rocket down here in A, just fine, middle of the road. If the enemy's playing dive and you are getting focused as a support, swapping to Rocket's pretty good. His damage against tanks and in certain duels, like because he can wall climb and jump in the air twice, there's a lot of melee characters that Rocket will just straight up win a duel on. Keep in mind, you heal yourself with the bouncing orbs, so you can shoot an orb to bounce in a room with you as you duel something and move. Rocket is nuts with his mechanical skill expression, but his ultimate is difficult to use. His team up is definitely going to buff up Punisher and Bucky quite a lot. A lot of Marvel Rivals players are bad at positioning, and because of that, Bucky gets an insane value. Like if they peak too early and Bucky hooks them, team fight 1, over. That's less likely to happen as you get higher, but I think it's so reliable to happen. I put him quite high up on A tier actually, and then he can get infinite ammo, which is even more nuts. His ultimate is insane, one of the better ultimates in fact, but there's a lot of good ones here. I would say top of A and S tier DPS all have great ultimates, and so does our last pick of the tier list, Star-Lord. I don't think is as good as Psylocke. His positioning is kind of weird because he's a flanker but wants to go up, whereas Psylocke is really good at going horizontal. She gets behind you, can set up for an assassination kill. Star-Lord kind of can't do that. He needs to crossfire, set up a flank. He's gonna be very patient. Star-Lord's not gonna really expect to carry in the neutral. He can only go so far because his range is bad and he doesn't have quick horizontal mobility. At least he needs to use it to get out rather than to get in. He's amazing at focus fire because his damage is so reliable and he has a spinny attack, but you have to be careful. He's quite punishable. You can't go as aggressive as the other flanker characters that are more durable. But his ult is team fight winning, and because you can auto aim from the sky, you can pick targets off away from some of the support ult utility. Yo, I kind of feel bad for Mr. Fantastic all the way down here at C tier on his own. I think maybe we can put him up to bottom of B. As a third DPS, he's just sort of okay. I actually think he has more interactions and playability than Venom. Let me run through this tier list real quick and let me see if there's anything I want to readjust. Gonna move the tanks around a little bit. Hulk is incredibly skill expressive, but Strange is easier to play more of the time, I would say. They're both not going to love playing against the Wolverine regardless. Magic looks kind of criminally underrated down here, so we're going to put her actually above. That's everything for the tier list for the first half of season 1 before the Human Torch and the Thing get added to the roster in the second wave. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to click subscribe and the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for...